Hello and welcome to Voices of Parenting podcast. I am so glad you're here. My name is Mussy Diskin. I am an advanced nurtured heart approach trainer. I am a parenting coach. I am also an inner wealth coach, which means that I help people rediscover and connect to the people that they truly were all along, but may have gotten forgotten along the way. So to find out more about me and what I offer, you can check out mussydiskin.com. I would love to connect and I would love to hear your feedback. Reach out to energizinghearts@gmail.com. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. A special thank you to our sponsors this week, Rabbi Zalman and Devorah Levin from Palo Alto, California, celebrating the incredible after school and preschool programs that they have fully enriched with Nurtured Heart Approach. So much greatness going on there. We honor the children. We honor you and your great work. And thank you for sponsoring our podcast this week and for helping this podcast continue. And for all those listening, you're all, if you have anything you'd like to celebrate, a special date, a special person, this podcast might be a nice opportunity for you to sponsor and get a shout out. Reach out at energizinghearts@gmail.com for sponsorship opportunities. Hello, everybody, and welcome today. I have a very special guest with me here. I have Renee Courier, who is or as we call her, Miss Renee, who is our kids' OT. And we are so blessed to have Renee in our lives. The difference that I've seen in my kiddo, my autistic kiddo, is just from day and night. And what's so special about Renee is that she's not only an OT, but she also does integrative primary resource therapy. I feel like I didn't say that exactly right, but Renee, you'll say that better. And it's like a laser light treatment that I feel like has totally brought my boy into like a calm state in his body, or way calmer state in his body. That is just anyone, like we had guests before we started who came like a year later, my in-laws, my sister, and they're like, whoa, what happened to him? You're like, wow. So we're so grateful. We love coming, and we love your open, welcoming office. Like if the kids are home from school, we all come. It's a family trip, So we're very, very grateful. It's really a gem. People like drive in from other states to see her. So it's a really big treat to have you here. I'm excited for everyone to hear your wisdom. And I'm already starting the conversation, but I wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself. So tell us a little bit about who you are and why you do what you do.
My name is Renee Courier. I'm an occupational therapist. I've been an occupational therapist for 25 years. And so my specialties are primitive reflex integration, sensory processing, behaviors, those kinds of things. I really started doing this work with my youngest daughter, who's now 17. But I realized that even as a pediatric OT, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with this kid. So I started doing a lot of research. I got trained and certified as a consultant in rhythmic movement training. I'm trauma certified. And like Mussy said, I do quantum reflex integration with lasers.
Yeah, that sounded a lot better than how I said it. I'm glad you introduced yourself. It's really, really special that we found you and that we got to work with you. And we get to work with you. We're very blessed.
Thank you.
I was thinking that I have an audience. We generally speak on this podcast about the Nurtured Heart Approach, which is my specialty, and that is not your specialty. But I was thinking what a gift it would be, and thank you so much for generously offering this time, for our parent body to kind of get more of an understanding and empathy for what our little people are experiencing. Because one of the big things we talk about in Nurtured Heart is not to energize negativity, and that has like a whole lot of meanings and explanation, but a huge part in it is understanding, believing in kids' essential goodness. They're not here to, make us mad or make it harder for us, or, and there's so much going on inside of them, and just having a window about that is so helpful just already in just bringing down the negativity. Because when you can understand what's happening, then you see that it's not, the kid's not to blame. There's empathy, compassion.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could walk us through a little bit about what even is sensory integration. Why does it exist? Like, what's happening in our children that needs that?
Okay. Yeah. So kind of some basics. So sensory integration really is a brain process. So as the brain takes in information, which is all of our sensory world, touch, sight, taste, feelings. Our brain has to take in that information, make sense of it, and then make a response to it. So if a child is demonstrating some challenges in behavior, usually, we know that something's going on in that process. Because again, kids are good natured from the get go. I never feel like a kid is trying to display negative behaviors or anything like that. They're always trying to do their best. But sometimes when we've got some challenges going on with that nervous system, they can't give you the best. And so that's what we see. Yeah, so sensory integration is really how our brain processes information and then gives us a response to it.
So what might be happening if a kid is, say, throwing things, yelling, scratching, hitting, biting, et cetera, in that process?
Okay, so say let's just talk about like sound, because that tends to be a really common one for a lot of kids. So if the sound is too much, the brain gets overwhelmed and then has to either go into a response mode of fight or flight, freeze. So a lot of times we see that fight or flight turning into running, elopement, then, or if they're like trying to fight, it is the biting, the scratching. They're trying to escape the overwhelmed feeling that they are experiencing.
Do they know that they're scratching and hitting us?
Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't, because a lot of times when the stress response in the brain is activated, it shuts off the frontal cortex, which is that memory piece too. So sometimes they can even like say, well, I don't know what I was doing. I don't remember, because really the brain is shut off in certain areas and it's into a lower part of the brain as far as their response. It's not really an active thought process.
Yeah. Which is so, I kind of shines a light on how ironic it is to be like, why did you do that? Or even in the moment, don't do that. And especially with our own escalation in response to their behavior, where it's like, hey, you better stop, and they're getting louder and louder. And that's exactly what they're running from, is the noise.
Exactly. Yeah. And so definitely it's not the time to like try to have that discussion where you're like, well, now is not the time, it doesn't work because their brain's already shut down. So they have no access to that part of their brain. So yeah, so definitely it's something that has to be kind of like brought up in a much delayed
Yeah, and we talk a lot about in Nurtured Heart about not responding in a moment of negativity, that it's not a time to teach lessons. And I love that you're kind of bringing the brain science behind that and evidence behind that actually the brain cannot learn, the brain cannot listen, the brain is shut down. In lieu of the threat that we need to fight off, it is not a good time to think. So the brain just shuts down so we can do our fighting, and we fight without knowing what we're doing.
And even as the adult too, I mean, it goes for us too. If we're in that state of stress, then we're not responding with our best brain either.
Yeah. So then talk to me about like, so there's kind of the two things. There's like in the moment, but then there's also the work you do and the skills you give and the hope that there is for us to help our little brains, our little people to strengthen. What is that? What is the, if a child is having excessive overwhelm for whatever sense, maybe all the senses, what hope is there? What can we do for them? Or what do you do for them?
Yeah, so as an OT, like a lot of times OTs will talk about using our vestibular sense, which is like your inner ear's ability to stay regulated and calm, along with proprioceptive, which is the input that we get through our muscles and joints. So vestibular is movement and proprioception is muscles and joints. So if we think of a child's nervous system at its very immature state, like an infant, we do things to them to help them reorganize themselves. So that looks like swaddling, rocking, bouncing, our shh sound. Those are all things that help calm the nervous system. So those are things that we are built into us. So we can still use those, we can still access those to help our kids. That's kind of the basis for coping in my mind. So the next part is like, okay, this is where I got to with my daughter. I'm like, I had some great coping skills, but I didn't have the fixing skills, which is when we back up to those primitive reflexes. And those are our foundation. So we have postural reflexes, which are like blink or put our hands out in front of us if we're falling. But we have primitive reflexes, which teach our brain how to move and learn. And as we integrate those reflexes, that becomes higher levels of neurological function.
Okay, so there's two parts of what you're saying. You're saying like we all naturally do this with babies, is we help soothe an unorganized, use the word organized, which is cool because like I think we can understand organization, right? Like we do that in our lives, even if we're not OTs. The unorganized like state of like, there's too much and I don't know how to get through it, that's overwhelming them. We can organize it. We do it naturally with babies. We use the sounds, the shushing, the cooing, the whatever we do. We use the movement. And so that's kind of the sensory input that we can give our kids as they're older. And if we have time, we'll get more into that as well, because I think some good ideas with that would be so fun. But then
Okay.
you're saying that the fixing piece goes back to the primitive reflexes, which we're born with. And then
Yep.
walk me through just a few more sentences. We're born with them, and then what's supposed to happen?
So what's supposed to happen is we get to use those reflexes to learn how to move. So a lot of them are tied to head and neck motion. When we move our head this way, our arms, I don't know if you can see this on camera, but like we have a tendency to flex one arm and extend the other arm. And what happens is that teaches our brain how to roll over. But we don't want that reflex to remain a constant as we're getting older and kids are learning to drive. Turn your head, you want to turn the wheel. No, it doesn't really work like that. So we want to use those reflexes and let them turn into controlled movement versus automatic movement.
Right. And these are like the things like when a baby's born and it cries, or when a baby's like kind of put down and his arms go up right away. Like those
Exactly.
things babies do that are automatic, that's the stuff that we don't want to see when they're growing. That's these reflexes.
Exactly. And sometimes what happens is, although we don't see it, the neurological pattern is still there and it's still kind of occurring, at least for the brain's perspective.
And what's so bad about that? Like if it's still happening, how is that affecting it?
It's responsive. So like in the situation of that fight or flight, which is the Moro reflex, we don't necessarily see that they're in control of it. It's just a response.
And can that trigger that I'm in threat, like I'm being threatened, I need to fight?
Exactly. So it's
I'm
just
being
so
triggered. Sorry, I'm being triggered by things like this kid who doesn't have the reflexes integrated is being triggered by things that actually are safe for a big kid. But for a baby, maybe they're not. But for a big kid, they are. They are safe, but they feel like they're unsafe because this neurological pathway is still triggered by the movement or the motion or whatever.
exactly by whatever sense is causing it.
Okay, so then what's next? So tell us more.
So what I do is usually do specific exercises to help reset that brain, to start kind of back it up, go through some of the same processes physically that integrate those reflexes. And then on top of that, what I found is that by adding the laser treatment, then we get to move a little faster. So if we do it naturally with just physical movement, it takes like what it would take a baby about a year to get through the process. Like if we were to go step by step by step. But doing the laser, we increase the speed of it.
Which is very beneficial to me, and I'm so grateful, and anyone who can work with you. But the hope in what you're saying is that it also can be done just with movements.
Exactly. Yeah.
So talk about how movements or the exercises, and we can put some resources in the show notes on like the books you gave me or whatever, that people can look this up themselves. How do the movements make a difference if these kids are doing these exercises every day with us? How is that making a difference?
So what it does is it takes the brain back to the original patterns of the reflex, uses the reflex so that it integrates. So we use the reflex to integrate it. So like say I'm working with a child who, when they're cutting with scissors, it looks like this. So that means we have the Babkin reflex, which is that hand-mouth connection. So a lot of lactation consultants know that reflex, because if they want to stimulate a baby to latch better, you massage the palm of their hand. That reflex integrates with crawling. So we might do crawling activities to go back and integrate that reflex.
Wow.
But it takes time.
So as a baby, it's a wonderful reflex because it helps them latch and get nourishment that they need.
Right. So we need it.
Or they will not survive. But naturally, it's triggered by the palm, and then by them crawling and using their palms, the brain then kind of grows up, matures.
It matures, it allows them, exactly. So it allows the mouth to work on its own and the hand to work on its own.
Right. So, but when we see a kid cutting like this and their mouth is going up and down, it means that it's still connected and they're still getting this like sort of sensory, it's almost like a sensory overload. If you think about it, every time you use your hand, you feel stuff in your face. It's like,
exactly,
that doesn't need to be happening.
Exactly. So if you want to put that into the perspective of attention, the brain has a really hard time being attentive when it's got reflexes going on, because it's already like distracted.
There's just so much going on. It's just, they can't be, they're trying to cut with the scissor and the teacher's wondering why they're not listening to the instructions or something.
Yeah. I thought that it would be good to give you an example of what was going on with my daughter specifically. So for her, one of her major things was not only was it sound, was it smell, but the big thing for her was tactile. So that's that touch piece. She could not put on socks without a tantrum. So socks were actually painful to her body. So although as a parent, I wanted to tell her, just put your socks on. We need to go. We need to get moving. As a therapist, I was able to say, okay, hold on. What's going on in this nervous system? How can I help her? So that would be the time where I would say, okay, we're going to put your socks on. I'm going to help you through this. Let's do some stomping before, which is proprioception. So I would encourage her to use and engage her nervous system in the way that I would hope that her brain could help her. So by providing those inputs, calm down the nervous system. So she would stomp around, then we put some socks on, put some shoes on, stomp around. So by providing her extra input, then she actually was more calm and organized and able to put those socks on.
Why does it help to get the proprioception? I mean, I think we get it from a baby. Like I know that it helps a baby, but I don't know why it helps the baby necessarily.
Yeah. So when we provide input via like vestibular proprioception, so movement or pressure, the brain can naturally go, it's like taking a deep breath. It goes, okay, I got this. I can do this. I can handle this. I feel better now. So it's just a calming sense that what we're going to do is prep their brain to be able to tolerate whatever is going on. That's why it's coping. It's not really fixing, but it is the coping that allows it to start to happen, to take us to that next step.
So I guess it communicates safety to a brain. So the brain's in fight and flight, right? And then it's like, you're safe. You don't have to fight. It's okay. Giving that pressure or giving that movement kind of wakes the brain up or maybe shuts that flight right down to say like,
Exactly. So it disrupts the pattern.
We're okay.
Yeah, it disrupts that automatic pattern.
Yeah.
So that you can have like more cognitive controls per se.
Yeah. And then with fixing that sensory the discomfort of putting socks on, is that something that she still struggles with, or is that something that can change over time? Like how does that?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that changes over time. So when we start to integrate those reflexes, the brain is mature enough to go, it sucks. I don't have to worry about this. This doesn't hurt. It's not over responding. So her brain is able to what we call accommodate and go, oh, I feel it for a little while, but then I forget about it and it doesn't bother me. So when we want to talk about kids in a classroom setting, a lot of times they're bothered by the lights overhead, the sounds of their friends, the feel of their clothes. They've got so much going on that you wonder, like, why aren't they paying attention in class? Well, their brain just can't. So when we integrate those reflexes, the brain goes, never mind. I'll just focus on the teacher because that's what I want to do.
Okay. So we're going to put some resources, some links of where people can go to get some of these exercises and see some of the stuff that they can do sort of to fix, right? That year-long process of let's go back to infanthood and put their brain through what a baby should have experienced so that these reflexes don't have to be so alive and charged up. Let's talk about for that teacher in that classroom with these kids that are kind of the coping, right? Like the things we can do in the meantime. Maybe you have like one or two suggestions of, I see my kids not here. I see that they're getting to that place. They're getting escalated or they're pushing up against these socks. You said stomping with your daughter. What are maybe, one or two other things that we can do? We can hopefully be creative and make it fun, right? But what are some things we can do to give that body that sense of safety?
Yeah, so things that we can do to give that body a sense of safety are things like dynamic seating. So maybe it's sitting on a ball so they can engage their core muscles a little bit more, which is an active way of giving proprioception. So like sitting on a ball would allow them to move and then allow their brain to be able to pay attention more. Sometimes we can do it with little tactile toys. Everyone's familiar with fidgets. So some of them are better than others. The least distracting are the better. So sometimes it's just a piece of Velcro glued to the underside of the desk or something that they can rub with their finger when they're feeling like they can't pay attention. Teachers, sometimes we have to do things like give them the opportunity to use headphones or put up some barriers for visual stimuli so that they maybe can have their little portfolios up and so that they're not so visually distracted if it's personal work time. So there's little techniques, and really what we need to do is think about the senses. What's causing the overwhelm? Is it the sound? Is it the sight? So then we address it kind of from that moment. Sometimes it's multiple things, but if we can identify like specifically what's bothering them, then we can come up with creative ways to help them.
Yeah. And it takes takes some attentive attunement and skill and knowledge to kind of figure that out sometimes. What is a
Yeah.
check work? What is that thing that's overwhelming to them?
Yeah. And so, if they're at an age of being able to say that, sometimes they may not be able to identify it. But if you can have them start to think about their bodies, think about what's going on, maybe right before, or if, some teachers will take little notes and be like, oh, we were doing this. And then all of a sudden, then we can go back and say, hey, let's think about it from a sensory perspective. There was lots of movement in the classroom. It got really noisy. There was, expectation of doing work in that time, so sometimes it does take some time to process and really think through what's going on specifically.
I know that with my kiddos, when the teachers can be on top of making sure they say what they mean and mean what they say, and that the schedule is communicated, and there can be changes, but communicate the changes, give a second to process it,
Exactly.
that helps so much too, just to keep less things for the brain to have to sort of soothe itself on its own.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, what I see is a lot of times kids, because they're kids, they lack a lot of control in their lives at this point. So, the more pieces of control we can give them, that's also that organization that we're going to provide them. And that's why we, do our laundry, we fold our towels, we put it away and go, did it. I'm in control of that and I did a good job. So when we allow kids to have control in little bits, and even if it is just prep, like, hey, we're gonna change our schedule just a little bit today. Would you be my helper and push all the chairs in? Giving them something and then giving them a little control, then we really get that brain to go, okay, I'm here. I'm here with you. I got it.
All right. Well, this was a really great intro. I feel like hopefully gave some people some understanding of what's going on with the kids and how this helps, how this all helps. For people who happen to live in Arizona or nearby and do want to work with you, if and when you have a slot available, how can they find you and what can they expect?
Yeah, so right now I do have a wait list. It's kind of significant, but you can always reach out to me via my website and my email address, which is integrationstherapy@icloud.com.
So we'll put her information and some links as well to some books and other resources that can help you find out more about this all and what you can do yourself in the show notes. Thank you so
Okay.
much for this time.
Thank you, Missy.
Hey, wait, don't go yet. Take a minute to find the beautiful quality that you have, that you appreciate about yourself.